Good morning, everyone. We are so happy to be here today. My name is Pam Johnson. I am the um, president of the Sarcoidosis Research Institute, and I am very excited today to have a guest all the way from across the pond representing Sarcoidosis UK, Graham Bloyd. Thank you so much for joining us today, Graham.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. It's a good afternoon for here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be associated with the Sarcoidosis UK organization.
Yeah, it's probably an unusual route because my background isn't in healthcare or in charity work. I spent 25 years of my career in global payments, project management, program management, and the like. But some years ago now, my wife was diagnosed with sarcoidosis, and probably like many people, I'd never heard of it. It didn't feature in any of my social groupings. There is no real awareness, I think, in the man in the street, so to speak. And I got involved initially as a volunteer, and then 2.5 years ago, a vacancy for senior executive came up, and I thought, well, I'll apply. There's no reason not to. But I had no real expectation that a charity so linked to a community and a patient base would think it was worth me taking the job. But they did, and 2.5 years later, I'm absolutely loving it. And I think what I particularly like about it is seeing the immediate impact of the work we do on a patient community. And our patient community is so not understood by friends, family, even medical health sometimes, that the diagnosis process can take so long. And what I'm seeing in this charity work is that we see an immediate impact. None of us involved in the office are clinicians. So we come at this very different from some of our European sarcoidosis charities, in that we're not coming here as a consultant or a professor with a medical background. We're very much approaching our patient community as people who need support. I think that's a really, really good place to come at it because our patient community needs support from people who understand them, not necessarily a new prescription or just a medical consultation. So we're providing a whole range of the things you can't buy almost.
Yeah,
You know, w-
you have
and that's
lots of a
why.
lot. You're offering lots of different programs to support patients. I mean, it's very popular among patients.
It is, and there's so much more we can do. And it's like anything, I think, when you're a not-for-profit organization, we can always spend more money than we've got. And we're very, very careful not to try to ask our patient base for too much support because the sarcoidosis patient isn't necessarily somebody who doesn't have wealth, but there's a lot of people out there who are unable to work. And I don't want people to feel they need to pay our charity for the services we provide. So everything we do is free. We'll let people join a support group. They can come to our social media, our website to talk to one of our nurses, for example. And yes, of course, we'd love someone to give us a donation, but we do everything we do. The starting point is we are here to provide a service to our patient community and not to get involved in anything which is financial. And I would feel very bad, I think, if it was contingent on a payment that we provide a service.
Tell us a little bit about your, I know you have a nurses hotline
Hmm.
or nurses helpline, and
Yeah.
tell us how that works.
Yeah, well, the nurse helpline, it's a milestone year this year. It's 10 years this year since we started. And the idea was when we first started 10 years ago, we employed one nurse for a couple of hours a week. We now have three nurses who work 4 afternoons a week. They're on contract basically, but anybody who would like to speak to a nurse about sarcoidosis is free to do so. We know historically that people who are diagnosed will be maybe not a full diagnosis from a consultant initially. They may go to their doctor, general practitioner in UK speak, and maybe they've been told, "Oh, I'm short of breath, I've got a cardiac problem or a lung problem." And the NHS, National Health Service in UK, is very, very good at its cancer pathway. So straight away you'll be sent off for all the tests about cancer. And in 4 to 6 weeks' time, you're back at your GP expecting to be told the worst about cancer because you've done your homework in those few weeks. You know what your pathway is, you know what your survival chances are. And the GP, great news, it's not cancer. I think it might be sarcoidosis, but I'm going to refer you to somebody. And that referral, because we're in the state, the health system, may take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, even perhaps to be seen. Now, of course, I've just been told I've got a disease or might have a disease. What's the first thing I do? I go home and I sit down in front of Dr. Google. And Dr. Google tells me how terrible sarcoidosis is all over the world and what it could possibly do to me. It doesn't say there's a very, very minor chance of this. If you have a cardiac sarcoidosis, it will tell you could die of heart failure. And of course, I'm now as a patient in a really, really strange situation because I haven't got cancer. That's good. I've
Yeah.
got something I've never heard of. My family have never heard of. I've never seen anybody who's got this disease. And my GP is referring me to a meeting in 6 months' time.
Mm.
So what do? They go to Google, they then look further and they find Sarcoidosis UK is on there. And we have a helpline number on there and they ring it. And they talk to my colleague Mary, who takes hundreds of calls from
Mm.
people who, "Oh, I've just been told I've got sarcoidosis. And what does this mean?" Mary does a great job at explaining what she can, but she's not a doctor, she's not a nurse. So we avoid going into anywhere which could be misleading. And if we can't handle that call from a reference to one of our videos, to our website, to one of our leaflets or fact sheets, we will offer them a call from one of our nurses. And typically, we'll get a nurse to call them back within a week to 10 days.
Mhm.
And that call is totally free. It can be a 2 minute call if someone has one quick question. It could be an hour. It could be a follow up call 3 months later.
Mhm.
And one of the advantages of our nurse helpline is that all three nurses have sarcoidosis. So I can
Yeah.
refer you to a nurse who totally understands what you're going through as a patient, but
Mm.
also they understand the medical side of as a qualified nurse.
That's
So
that is remarkable that
they're not
that you
easy to
have.
find. We're holding on to them very carefully. We don't want to
Yeah.
lose these nurses. But yeah, so we've been so lucky to have them. And we do probably 60 calls a month. And yeah, we know the patient base that has that call goes
Mm.
away having been given straight talking facts. We don't get into medical records. We don't get into recommending treatments because we don't have that relationship with the patient. But if you
Right.
want to know what does neurosarcoidosis mean to you as a new patient,
Hmm.
a nurse with neurosarcoidosis can give you a very, very good explanation what it might mean to you, what it means to your patient community, what treatments you might have. And that I think is a massively important thing that we do. And
Oh yeah, that
we
sounds
don't
very
charge for
very
this service.
impressive.
Yeah, we don't charge for this service at all. It's totally available for free. And some people say, "Oh, it's a bit dangerous. It's a charity. You've got an open check there." Yes, we have. But the whole point of existing is to provide support to our patient base.
Yeah.
So we will provide that service.
I was looking at your website and reading about the nurse helpline, and I know you say that you were saying the calls could be 2 minutes, it could be longer, and the business side of the organization wants you to make the call shorter, but like you said, your focus is helping the patient, so however long it takes is what
Yeah,
it should
I
be.
mean, we have reserves. We can afford to do it. One of my concerns is if we start to see a long wait between calls as well, because I don't want. I'm not providing a sort of an ER service. If you ring up, I'm not putting you onto the nurse today. We don't have a nurse in the office. We treat it as being a non-urgent service, but I do want to get to that patient within 2 weeks. And I
Hmm.
think about 95% of times we will get back to a patient within 2 weeks. Very often it's within 4 or 5 days, particularly in the summer when it's quiet. But we do find some seasonal bunching between sort of February, March, and April when we have many more calls for the service than we can actually meet. But
Yeah,
equally, I can't keep employing nurses in case calls come. That
right,
wouldn't be fair on the nurse who's on a contract basis.
right. Well, tell us a little bit about you. You have a lot of a very prominent social media
Hmm.
presence. You do a
Yeah,
lot of things on Facebook, I understand.
we do everything but TikTok, and there's a reason I'm not going dancing on TikTok. So
Yeah. Well, you
TikTok,
should, Graham. You should.
you haven't seen me dancing. You don't want to see that.
Oh.
But yeah, so we use X, Twitter as was, Instagram, and Facebook as our three primary methods. We also moved on to Blue Sky when X seemed to be having some issues last year. And we're also on LinkedIn, but to a lesser extent. So effectively, the Instagram and the X pages largely are just posting imagery-based messaging.
Mhm.
Facebook is much bigger. Across the whole of social media, we have 15,000 regular followers. There will be some duplication between channels there, but I don't think there's much. So within Facebook, we have a Sarcoidosis UK main page of general information about the disease.
Hmm.
We then have 20 social media groups hanging off that. So there's a neurosarcoidosis group, there's a cardiac group, which allows patients to come into the general group and follow us and interact, but also to drill down more into like-minded people with the specific disease basis or a regional basis. So, for example, you may be in a Scottish social media group or in a cardiac group, or of course you could be in both. We moderate as best we can. Every new post is moderated, so there will be a lag for page going in. We don't want people to just have free reign to say what they want on social media. We don't have many problems. Occasionally, we have to remove a post. We try to avoid too much recommendation for medication, particularly alternative medications. We do get the occasional peddler of CBD and things creeping in, and again,
Right.
as a rule, we try to remove them because we want to represent the thinking of our medical panel, and our medical panel would say probably that alternative remedies do have a place, but they're not the prime treatment. And I think it's important we reflect the medical panel's view on what treatment should be, because we get into snake oil salesmen very quickly if we're not careful. And I don't want my patient to be feeling they're taking advice from somebody who is not qualified to do so. So the moderators are very, very good at dealing with those. We do hold some messages up and contact the submitter to make sure they understand why it's being deleted or change it. But yeah, on the whole, it's a very, very good self-supporting base, which we keep an eye on. But we've always said the best advocate for healthcare is the patient. And a group of patients supporting each other can be very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Inevitably, with social media, opinions come out from time to time, and we encourage opinions. We just encourage them to play nicely, basically.
Right. Right. Also, you have patient days. Tell us about those.
We do. We try to do this once a year. We haven't done one yet this year. We try to get a group of speakers together to do a 3 or 4 hour webinar, and that normally be around a subject. So we would ask our patient community what they'd like to hear about. We would then collate a meeting with 3 or 4 consultants, delivering a presentation of some sort, followed by a Q&A session. We've had some really, really good speakers over the years. We then try and take that patient day contact and cut it down into smaller videos, because not everybody can do a 9 o'clock meeting on a Monday morning. Some are working, some are in bed still. But by making that presentation available after the event, it is very, very powerful. And
Yeah.
again, if we're doing a day on a particular aspect of sarcoidosis, not everything may apply to you. So you may dip out and you may dip back. So we'll look at the moment how we work on patient days in the future, because a 4 hour session on Zoom webinar actually can be quite exhausting. Breaking them down into 10, 15, 20-minute videos can be really powerful. And we've just published in the last few weeks some absolutely brilliant videos by Professor James Galloway from King's College in London. And he's basically gone back to the very basics of sarcoidosis and just done an 8-minute talk to camera in layman's language about why, for example, why a consultant might not be able to diagnose you straight away. And that's talking the right language for our patient base.
Yeah. Yeah. Does Sarcoidosis UK collaborate or work with any other sarcoidosis organizations in other parts of the world?
We collaborate across Europe.
Mhm.
It's a little bit different because the way Europe works, a lot of the European charities are government or health service funded, and they're mostly led by a consultant physician or a surgeon. And that changes the dynamic quite a lot, and they're much more focused on research, medical guidance, advice, and things like that. We've made a real point of being the patient supporter and sort of the advocate. And I think that works for us.
Yeah.
Again, post Brexit, there's obviously a big difference now in regulation between Europe and the UK, and it probably works for our patient base that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you certainly have a lot of impressive programs going on. I'm sure you have a lot of patients who are very grateful for the information that you provide and the connections that you make. If how do you describe what you do to people who are not familiar with sarcoidosis or anything like that? What do you say to people to describe what Sarcoidosis UK is all about?
Well, I think I would say that the first thing we do is to support people. And I don't care what that support is. It could be a 2 minute phone call. It could be a signposting session, holding someone's hand, digitally in a time of need. So that support piece is really, really important. But we also know that there needs to be greater awareness because even within the medical community, there are people who don't know very much about the disease. So we've provided a training course for general practitioners via the Royal College of GPs, and we're seeing good take up of that. It's only a half-hour course, the basics of signposting what is sarcoidosis, because too often people end up going down a route of treatment that turns out 2 or 3 years later to have been incorrect. If
Mhm.
we can promote that awareness at the grassroots of the first person you go and see, because there is no point in going down a cancer pathway if it's quite obviously not cancer. But if the GP doesn't know that, then very often they will go down a specific route, and we'd like them to understand what more of the options could be. I mean, we often hear the story that once the consultant or the physician hears the horse's hooves in the hallway, they know what they're treating until they find it's a zebra that's come in. And I think so often that we are conditioned to what we think a disease is because of the high level symptoms. And there could be more to that. And we know that many of our patients are wait a long time for the right diagnosis. And when they get the right diagnosis, they're superbly looked after. But maybe 2 years have been wasted along the way. And that awareness piece is so, so important.
Yes,
And
yes.
finally, we're looking to fund research. We're
Mhm.
not a big charity. We only have a few £100,000 a year of income. So
Mhm.
we're not going to be the charity that cures sarcoidosis. But we may be the charity that provides the piece of research that lines up the holes in the Swiss cheese, so we say, that somebody has that light bulb moment and say, this is what we could do.
Mhm.
I'm not naive to think that our budget is ever going to be the next big breakthrough, but we might just be a stepping stone on that route.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's very impressive and very exciting to know all the wonderful things that you're doing and certainly all the services that you're providing for patients because it's always better to have more information and I know the patients appreciate everything that you do for them. So thank you so much for joining us today and we look forward to communicating with you and perhaps collaborating in the future as well.
It'll be absolutely great. I think it's important that we all work together because we're battling that one disease for our patient base. Doesn't matter who we are or where we are in the world, I think. So
That's
yeah,
right.
we should keep in touch.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. You take care.
Thank you very much.